Hello again, this is Larry Hayden. Welcome to the Larry Hayden Podcast. This is episode 20, and the topic is Examining Atheism. Please listen till the end when I'll give you resources to learn more. Are you an atheist? Well, all I can say is that you have an astonishing amount of faith. Maybe you don't realize that to be an atheist, you must believe 4 things. Number 1, that nothing produced everything. Number 2, that non-life produced life. Number 3, randomness produced precision. And number 4, chaos produced order. Now that's an astounding amount of faith. I simply do not have that much faith. Instead, I believe that God exists, and I invite you to listen to the reasons I believe God exists. One is the cosmos, our solar system. Philosophers and thinkers down through the centuries have concluded that there are really only 3 different possibilities to explain existence. A, it has always existed. And if that's the case, there's no need for a creator. Something that has always existed doesn't need anything to have brought it into existence. It's just always been there. B, it created itself. It brought itself into existence. Again, no need for a creator. Some have thought that that's an adequate explanation for the existence of the universe. And C, it was created by God, the Creator. Let's consider which of these 3 options is the most reasonable to believe. The first option, that the universe has always been, or is eternal, has been utterly rejected by the scientific community. Why? The scientific evidence against an eternal universe has demolished this theory. It's not a group of pastors who scratched option A off the list. No, the scientific community scratched option A off the list. Why? Astronomers are pointing to the discoveries of the background radiation echo, the second law of thermodynamics, and the motion of the galaxies, all of which have led them to conclude that the universe had a beginning. Stephen Hawking, the renowned late astronomer from Cambridge University, agreed that this is the consensus. He said, almost everyone believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning. That's interesting. This is in perfect harmony with what the Bible says in the very first verse, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The Bible makes it clear that the universe actually had a beginning, exactly like the scientific community has finally discovered more than 3,000 years after Moses penned those words. Arno Penzias, who was awarded a Nobel Prize for discovering evidence, the background radiation echo, that the universe had a beginning, agrees that the scientific data lines right up with the Bible. He said during an interview in the New York Times, the best data we have are exactly what I would have predicted had I had nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole. Well, because the universe had a beginning, that rules out option A, doesn't it? That the universe has always existed. Well, very well, that leaves us with 2 options to explain the existence of the universe. Let's talk about option B for a moment. B, the cosmos created itself. This option, that the universe created itself, is fraught with problems. The idea that anything could create itself is absurd, for it would have to exist and not exist at the same time. That's totally irrational. For something to create itself would have to be before it was. This violates an ironclad law of knowledge, the law of non-contradiction. The law of non-contradiction states A cannot be both A and non-A at the same time and in the same relationship. For example, you can't be here in the United States right now and in England right now. You are either here or you're not here. So then it's absurd to suggest that the universe existed, A, and didn't exist, non-A, at the same time. That is precisely what would be required for the universe to have created itself. So surely the universe did not create itself. Yet this is what leading atheist thinkers believe. How did the universe create itself? Well, many of them have concluded, like Richard Dawkins, that the universe evolved literally out of nothing. If you consider yourself an atheist with a sincere interest in truth, there are several things about Christianity I feel are critical to understand. Let's agree that truth matters regardless of beliefs. Integrity is a most important point. You as an individual should be able to explain why you accept or reject some particular view of the world, and your explanation should reflect the actual beliefs in question. This requirement applies universally, even if you prefer to define your atheism as merely a lack of belief. It's common to hear descriptions of Christianity that are profoundly divergent from what Christians actually believe. In other words, you can't honestly say that you've considered the message of Christianity unless you actually know what the message is. I'm not suggesting that all atheists are uninformed. On the contrary, I acknowledge that many atheists can articulate the Christian position accurately. However, I believe many more atheists, when asked to give an explanation of Christianity, present a cartoonish view of it. For example, they say that Christianity requires blind faith. Actually, Christianity rejects blind faith. That Christians are called to blind faith is simply untrue. There's no place in the Bible where human beings are told, believe this just because. This misunderstanding is due to a mistaken definition of faith. The Bible's view of faith is best described as trust. This is certainly different from proof, but faith is never presented as belief without evidence or against all evidence. In fact, the Bible consistently points to historical events as basis for our faith. That's Numbers 14:11 and John 14:11. Consider that, quote, absolute proof, unquote, is actually rare in human experience. There are virtually no circumstances where anyone has the ability to prove mathematically, logically, infallibly, or anything before he acts. Does this mean we cannot act? No. But it does mean we're constantly acting when we have good reasons, but not absolute proof. That, in a nutshell, is the faith that the Bible calls for. Rather than calling us to place faith, trust in the world or other people, Christianity calls on us to place faith, reasonable trust in God and His message to us. As an atheist, you exhibit faith of this kind every day. The difference is in the object of that faith, not in the substance. You exhibit faith, reasoned trust, every time you sit on a chair without first checking it for stability. You exhibit faith every time you ride in a car without performing an exhaustive inspection. You act on faith whenever you eat food cooked by other people or take medicines provided by a doctor. You cannot have absolute proof that any of these things are reliable each and every time, but you can have good reasons to trust in them. Ultimately, you place the same faith in your view of the world, atheism. I ask you to consider the fact that no matter what you believe or do not believe, you cannot claim to have proof, not in an absolute sense. The reality of human experience is that we cannot know everything. We have no choice but to act in trust, faith, based on what we have good reason to believe, even if we can't prove it. Christianity is not an escape from reason or a free fall into blind faith. fact, it's exactly the opposite, a truth that draws in even unwilling converts on the very strength of its evidence. Christianity is uniquely tied to both reason and evidence. The Bible is unique in its approach to reason and evidence. Even Jesus Christ appealed to evidence when he was challenged. In John 5, Jesus acknowledged that others won't or can't believe what he says on blind faith. So he offers 3 lines of evidence as reasons to trust him. God does not ask us to follow him blindly or ignorantly. Rather, Christianity offers reasons to believe, evidence in nature, in science, in logic, in history, and in human experience. I believe that there are people who just by coincidence, quote, stumbled, close quote, upon this podcast, who are not only atheists, but who also don't even believe that Jesus existed. To you, I say, if you would seriously like to verify your belief, read the book titled Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell, who became a Christian by studying the Bible to prove there is no God. Next, I encourage you to listen to episode 7 of this podcast, The Inerrancy of the Bible, just to boost your faith in the Holy Bible so that you can become a mature Christian and heed the words of Jesus in John 14:11, where he said, "Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or else believe on account of the works themselves." Now, here are the resources I mentioned to learn more about God and the Bible. I recommend 3 online websites. First, go to gotquestions.org. That's G-O-T, no space, questions.org. You can enter your questions and find reliable answers to over 700,000 Bible questions. It's an extensive site, and it reflects the conventional conservative Protestant viewpoint. Next, go to alwaysbeready.com. That's alwaysbeready, no spaces.com by Bible scholar Charlie Campbell. And finally, visit my website, larryhaydenpodcast.com. And this concludes the podcast. Thank you, and I wish you peace always.